I was banned from Thanksgiving dinner, but I legally control a $15 million inheritance my own sister doesn't even know exists. The text came in on a Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving. My mother, as always, delivered it like a business memo. No emotion, no explanation, just a wall of cold, surgical words that carved me right out of the family photo before the turkey even hit the table. Claire, after much discussion, your father and I have decided it would be best if you did not attend Thanksgiving this year. Your presence has become disruptive to the family dynamic. We wish you well. I read it 7 times. Standing in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, wearing the same sweatpants I'd had since college, a mug of coffee going cold in my hands. 7 times, because my brain kept refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. My mother had spent 47 years perfecting the art of cruelty wrapped in calligraphy fonts, but this was different. This was exile. My sister, Emma, had gotten married 6 months earlier at a vineyard in Napa. I'd been her maid of honor. I'd planned the bachelorette party, dealt with the meltdown over the flower arrangements, and smiled through 37 fittings while she complained about her fat arms when she was a size 2. And then, at the reception, something happened that I still can't fully explain. Their father, my stepfather, Richard, gave a speech. He talked about his 2 beautiful daughters and then proceeded to list every single one of Emma's accomplishments. Law school, her fiancé's tech startup, the house they'd just bought in Marin County. Then he raised his glass to me and said, "And Claire, well, Claire is still figuring things out." The room laughed. Not a mean laugh exactly, more of an awkward, polite, what do you say to that laugh? But my mother laughed too, and Emma smiled. And something inside me just broke. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I walked outside, sat on a bench near the valet stand, and called my attorney. Not because I had a plan, because I needed to hear a voice that wasn't pretending I was invisible. You see, here's the thing my family never bothered to learn about me. I'm not a failure. I'm not figuring things out in the way they mean it, like I'm some wandering loser who can't hold a job or keep a relationship. I'm a trust and estate administrator. I manage money for people who have so much of it that they need a whole separate person to make sure it doesn't accidentally ruin their grandchildren's lives. I don't drive a fancy car. I don't post vacation photos on Instagram. I live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment and I drive a 2016 Honda Civic. Because I learned a long time ago that the best way to handle wealth is to pretend it doesn't exist until you absolutely need it. And right now, the wealth I was handling belonged to my sister. Let me back up. When Richard married my mother 15 years ago, I was 22 and Emma was 18. Richard was wealthy, not obscenely so, but comfortable. He'd made his money in commercial real estate, bought and sold strip malls and office buildings at exactly the right time. When he married my mother, he set up trust funds for both of us, equal amounts, $1 million each, to be released when we turned 30. It was his way of showing that he saw us both as his daughters, even though I had a different biological father who'd walked out when I was 3. But here's what nobody knew. 6 years ago, Richard was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. It progressed fast, faster than anyone expected. 2 years ago, he sat me down in his study, just me, not Emma, not my mother, and handed me a thick legal document, his durable power of attorney for financial decisions, and a separate document that named me as the sole trustee of Emma's trust fund. I remember staring at the papers. "Why me?" I asked. Richard looked at me with these sad, tired eyes. He was 58 but looked 70. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette he wasn't supposed to be smoking. "Because Emma can't handle it," he said. "She's never been able to handle anything. Your mother knows that. That's why she's pushing so hard to get Emma married off to someone with money. But you understand how this works. You're careful, you're smart, and you don't let people see what you're capable of." I didn't know whether to feel honored or insulted, but I signed. And over the next 2 years, as Richard's health declined, I quietly managed not just Emma's trust, but most of the family's financial affairs. Richard had made some bad investments. Commercial real estate took a hit, and he'd leveraged too much. By the time he got sick, the $1 million he'd put aside for each of us had dwindled to about $400,000. Not nothing, but not the safety net he'd envisioned. So I fixed it. Without telling anyone, I liquidated the bad assets, consolidated what was left, and reinvested in a mix of low-risk municipal bonds and a few aggressive tech funds that I'd been tracking for years. I worked nights and weekends. I built spreadsheets that looked like NASA launch documents. And slowly, quietly, I turned $400,000 into $15 million. $15 million, all sitting in a trust fund that legally belonged to Emma, with me as the sole trustee.
That meant I had absolute unilateral control over every dollar. I could disperse funds, invest them, hold them, or, and this is the part that matters, withhold them entirely. The trust document, which Richard had drafted with a very sharp estate attorney, gave the trustee broad discretion to determine if the beneficiary was financially responsible and emotionally capable of managing the assets. And if the beneficiary was not capable, the funds would remain in trust until the beneficiary turned 45, at which point they would be distributed in annual increments of no more than 10%. Richard had put that clause in specifically because of Emma. He loved her, I have no doubt about that, but he also knew she would burn through money like dry grass. She'd already gone through 2 engagement rings before she met her current husband, Mark. She'd leased a BMW, then a Mercedes, then a Porsche, each time rolling negative equity into the next loan like a financial suicide pact. My mother had paid off her credit cards 3 times. Emma wasn't bad. She was just lost. And lost people, when you hand them $15 million, don't get found. They just get lost in nicer cars. So I held the money, I watched it grow, and I told no one. Not my mother, who called me every week to ask why I wasn't more like Emma. Not Emma herself, who posted Instagram stories from brunch while her trust fund sat in an index fund earning 7% annually. Not Mark, her new husband, who had the kind of expensive sneakers and vague employment situation that screamed grifter. Nobody knew. Except Richard, and Richard had died 8 months before that disastrous wedding toast. He died on a Tuesday. I was holding his hand when he went. My mother was in the hallway on the phone with a caterer for Emma's engagement party. Emma was shopping for shoes. And Richard, with his last coherent breath, looked at me and whispered, "Don't let her ruin it." Then he was gone. And I was the only person in the world who knew the truth about the money.
After the wedding, after the toast that turned me into the family joke, after my mother's text banning me from Thanksgiving, I sat in my kitchen and I made a decision. Not a revenge decision, not yet. Just a quiet, practical decision. I would not reach out. I would not beg. I would not show up with a casserole and pretend nothing had happened. For the first time in my life, I would let them have their holiday without me, and I would see what happened. What happened was that Emma called me on Thanksgiving morning. Not to invite me, to ask me to pick up her dry cleaning. "I forgot to grab my dress from the cleaners," she said, like we'd spoken yesterday, like she hadn't watched her husband high-five his brother when Richard called me a screw-up. "Can you swing by and bring it? Mom's making me do the first toast and I have nothing to wear." "I'm not coming," I said. "What? Why?" "Mom banned me, remember? Disruptive to the family dynamic." There was a pause. I could hear my mother in the background telling someone to carve the roast. Emma lowered her voice. "Claire, she didn't mean it. She was just stressed about the charcuterie board." She sent me a text, in writing, telling me not to come. "Well, come anyway. Just bring the dry cleaning and pretend it didn't happen." This is the thing about my family that I'd spent my whole life trying to explain to therapists and friends and boyfriends who couldn't understand why I didn't just cut them off. They don't see the cruelty. They don't register it. My mother can say something so devastating that it rewires your brain chemistry, and 5 minutes later she'll ask why you look upset. It's not gaslighting. It's something worse. It's a complete inability to understand that other people have feelings that matter as much as hers. "I'm not coming," I said again, "and I'm not picking up your dry cleaning." Emma laughed, actually laughed. "Okay, fine, I'll figure it out. But seriously, you're being dramatic. Everyone loves you. Nobody thinks you're a failure." That was a lie, and we both knew it. But I didn't argue. I just said, "Happy Thanksgiving, Emma," and hung up. For the next 3 months, I didn't hear from any of them. Not a word. My mother didn't call for our usual Sunday chat. Emma didn't send her usual barrage of texts about her spin class or her new candles or whatever else she was using to fill the void where a personality should be. Radio silence. And I realized, with a clarity that felt like a surgical incision, that I had always been the one maintaining those relationships. I called them. I texted them. I showed up for things. And when I stopped, they didn't even notice I was gone. So I did what any reasonable person would do with an extra 15 hours a week and no family drama. I worked. I built my client list. I took on 3 new trusts, including one for a tech founder who'd made $80 million before he turned 30 and was terrified he'd become one of those lottery ticket guys. I liked him. He was anxious and earnest, and he called his mother every day. I tripled his money in 6 months. Nothing illegal, just smart diversification and a healthy tolerance for calculated risk. And all the while, I kept watching Emma's trust grow. 15 million became 16, then 17.
By February, it was hovering just under 18 million. I had spreadsheets tracking every dollar, every expense, every potential tax implication. I knew more about Emma's financial future than she knew about her own checking account. Then, on the first weekend of March, my phone rang. My mother. "We're having Easter dinner," she said, like we'd spoken yesterday. "Sunday the 31st. Be here at 2. Not a question, not an invitation, a command. "I have plans," I said. "Change them. It's 6 weeks away. I can't change plans I haven't made yet." She sighed, that heavy, dramatic sigh she'd been using on me since I was 12, and she realized I wasn't going to be the easy daughter. "Claire, your sister is pregnant. She wants to tell everyone at Easter. You need to be there." Emma was pregnant. Of course she was. She'd been married for 9 months and she was already pregnant, because Emma did everything the way you're supposed to do it. Law school, engagement, wedding, house, baby. The checklist of a life that looks perfect from the outside and feels like a cage from the inside. I'd been in therapy long enough to know that I didn't actually want her life, but I was human enough to feel the sting of comparison. "Fine," I said. "I'll be there." I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the trust document. Here's what I'd never told anyone. After Richard died, I found an addendum to his will, stored in a separate envelope in his safe deposit box. A letter, written in his shaky handwriting, addressed to me. It said, in part, "Claire, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I never said this to your face, but you were always the strong one. Emma got the charm, your mother got the looks, but you got the spine. Don't let them break it. The money in Emma's trust isn't really for her, it's for her future, and you're the only one I trust to decide what that future looks like. Be fair, but be firm, and if they ever push you too far, remember, you don't owe them your silence." I'd read that letter 100 times. Every time it made me cry. But this time, something felt different. This time, when I read the words, "You don't owe them your silence," I didn't feel sad. I felt calm. The way you feel calm when you finally realize you've been holding a key the whole time and nobody told you what it unlocked. Easter Sunday arrived like a slow-motion car crash. I dressed carefully, not to impress them. I'd given up on that years ago, but to armor myself. Black slacks, a silk blouse the color of charcoal, low heels that I could run in if necessary, though I wasn't sure what I'd be running from. I drove to my parents' house in Lake Oswego, a suburb of Portland where every house looked like a magazine spread, and every lawn was chemically optimized to a shade of green that didn't occur in nature. The house smelled like ham and resentment. My mother had gone all out, fresh flowers, a table set for 12, crystal glasses that hadn't been used since the last time she'd had something to prove. Emma was already there, glowing in that particular way that pregnant women glow when they're enjoying all the attention. Mark stood beside her, one hand on the small of her back, looking like a real estate agent who just closed a big deal. "Claire," my mother said, kissing the air next to both my cheeks, "you look rested." Translation, "You look like you haven't been trying hard enough." "Thanks, Mom. You look stressed." Her smile froze. Emma jumped in, as she always did, to smooth things over. "Claire, come sit next to me. I want to tell you about the nursery." The nursery, of course. We spent 20 minutes discussing paint colors and crib models and something called a wipe warmer that I pretended to care about. Then we sat down for dinner, and my father, my stepfather's ghost in a way, though Richard was gone, said grace, and we ate, and everyone pretended that I wasn't the family disappointment quietly chewing her ham. After dinner, Emma stood up and tapped her glass. "So, Mark and I have some news." My mother gasped theatrically, even though she already knew.
My father looked confused, on the off chance the news was about something other than a baby. The other guests, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin I barely recognized, leaned in with the hungry anticipation of people who'd been waiting all afternoon for drama. "I'm pregnant," Emma said, and everyone applauded. Everyone except me. I smiled. I even clapped a little, but I didn't stand up. I didn't rush to hug her, because I was watching my mother's face, and I saw something there that I hadn't expected. Relief. Not joy. Not excitement. Relief. Like a weight had been lifted. And I realized in that moment what was really happening. My mother didn't care about the baby. She cared about the money. Let me explain. Richard's will had been complicated. He'd set up a life insurance trust that paid my mother a comfortable income, but the bulk of the assets, the real wealth, was tied up in the trusts for me and Emma. My mother had access to about $80,000 a year, enough to maintain the house and her lifestyle, but not enough for anything extravagant. She'd been counting on Emma's trust to supplement her own income, And Emma's trust, under the terms Richard had said, allowed for discretionary distributions for health, education, maintenance, and support of Emma and her immediate family. Immediate family. That included her children. That included, in my mother's mind, my mother herself. The baby wasn't a grandchild. The baby was a withdrawal slip. After the applause died down, Emma sat back down next to me and whispered, "Mom wants to talk to us about something after everyone leaves." "About what?" "I don't know. Something about the trust." My heart didn't race. It just settled into a steady, quiet rhythm. The same rhythm it had when I balanced Richard's portfolio during the market downturn. The same rhythm it had when I told my boss I was quitting to start my own firm. The same rhythm it had when I decided 3 months ago that I was done chasing a family that didn't want to be caught. The guests left around 8. My aunt took the leftover ham. My uncle made a joke about the traffic. My cousin promised to call more often, a promise we both knew she wouldn't keep. And then it was just us. Me, Emma, Mark, my mother, and my stepfather's ghost sitting in the living room like jurors about to hear a verdict. My mother didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Claire, we need to talk about Emma's inheritance." "What about it?" "Richard left her a trust, a significant one, and we think it's time to start accessing it." "For what?" Emma jumped in. "For the baby, for the house. We want to renovate the kitchen and add a nursery, and Mark's business is in a growth phase, so we need some capital, and, my mother said, cutting her off, "I've been carrying some debt that Richard's income used to cover. Nothing major, but I'd like to pay it off and not have to worry." I looked at my mother, then at Emma, then at Mark, who hadn't said a word but whose eyes were doing the kind of math that made me want to check my wallet. "Okay," I said, "let me see the request in writing. I'll review it and get back to you." My mother blinked. "What do you mean, review it?" "I mean, Richard appointed me as trustee. I have a fiduciary duty to evaluate all distribution requests and determine if they're in Emma's best interest." The room went very quiet. Emma looked at my mother. My mother looked at me like I'd just sprouted a second head. Mark shifted in his seat, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor. "Claire," my mother said slowly, "you don't control the trust. You're just the administrator. Richard set it up so that Emma would have access when she needed it." "No," I said, "that's not what the document says. I have full discretionary authority. I can approve distributions, deny them, or modify the terms under certain conditions. I can even, if I determine that Emma is not capable of managing the funds, delay distribution until she's 45. Emma's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about $15 million, I said. "Actually, closer to 18 million now. It's been growing nicely. Low-risk index funds, a few municipal bonds, some aggressive tech plays that paid off. I've been managing it for 2 years. Richard asked me to, and I've been very, very careful with it." My mother stood up, not slowly, not dramatically. She just stood up, like her body was reacting before her brain could catch up. "You're lying." "I'm not. Richard would never have given you that kind of control. He did. I have the documents. You can see them anytime. You're trying to steal from your own sister." I didn't flinch. I'd known this accusation was coming. I'd rehearsed it in my head 100 times, in the dark, in my apartment, while the rain hit the windows and I wondered if I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. "I'm not stealing anything," I said. "The money is still there, all 18 million of it, but I'm not going to release it for a kitchen renovation or your credit card debt or Mark's business growth until I see a real plan, a budget, a financial advisor's evaluation, and even then I'm going to release it in increments, not a lump sum, because that's what Richard wanted. That's what I agreed to do." Emma started crying, not the pretty kind of crying, the ugly kind, with snot and hiccups and a voice that cracked like a teenager's. "No," I said, "I'm doing this because someone has to. You can't handle this money, Emma. You've never been able to handle money, and if I give it to you now, it'll be gone in 2 years, less if Mark has access to it." Mark stood up. "That's out of line." "Is it? What's your business, Mark? You've never actually told anyone. You just say tech and change the subject." He didn't answer, because he couldn't, because I'd done my research. Mark's tech startup was a drop-shipping company that had lost $40,000 in the last 18 months. He'd been living off Emma's salary, and I suspected, dipping into her savings. I had the bank records to prove it. I'd had them for months. My mother sat back down, slowly, the fight draining out of her like water from a cracked face. "What do you want?" It was the first honest question she'd asked me in years. "I want you to see me," I said. "Not the version of me you invented to make yourself feel better about your own choices. Not the failure you need me to be so you can feel successful. Just me, the real me. The one who manages $18 million without breaking a sweat. The one who sat with Richard while he died because none of you could be bothered. The one who has been holding this family together with spreadsheets and silence while you all laughed at me behind my back." Nobody spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked. The furnace kicked on, a low rumble that filled the silence like a distant train. "I'm not going to cut you off," I said.
That's not what this is. Emma will get her money, but she's going to get it on a schedule, a budget, with oversight. And if anyone tries to challenge my authority as trustee, I have a legal team on retainer that will bury them in paperwork for years. I'm not being cruel. I'm being responsible. Richard asked me to protect her from herself, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand. You could have just told me. Could I? When? At the wedding? After your husband called me a screw-up? At Thanksgiving? After Mom banned me for being disruptive? When exactly was I supposed to sit you down and explain that I've been quietly managing a fortune on your behalf while you posted pictures of your avocado toast? She didn't have an answer. None of them did. I stood up, picked up my purse, walked to the door, and then I turned around because there was one more thing I needed to say. I'm not coming to Easter next year, I said, or Thanksgiving, or Christmas. Not unless I'm invited. Actually invited. Not as a pity guest or a punchline or someone to pick up the dry cleaning. I'll manage the trust from a distance, I'll send reports, I'll be professional. But I'm done pretending that this is a family. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in my life, she had nothing to say. I drove home in the dark. The roads were empty. The radio played something soft and forgettable. And when I walked into my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I just sat down at my laptop, opened the trust spreadsheet, and updated the balance. $18,312,411. Not mine. Never mine. But mine to protect. Mine to control. Mine to use as a shield and a sword and a mirror that showed my family exactly who they've been ignoring for 15 years. The next morning, I got a text from Emma. Just 4 words. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Because I'd learned something that Richard had tried to teach me on his deathbed. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes silence is the only answer that can't be argued with. My mother called 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message, her voice tight and strange, like she was reading from a script she hadn't written. Claire, your father and I would like to have you over for dinner. Just us. No Emma. No Mark. Just a conversation. Please call me back. I haven't called her back. I'm not sure I will. Not because I'm holding a grudge. Because I'm holding something more valuable than a grudge. I'm holding the truth. And the truth is that my family didn't reject me because I was a failure. They rejected me because they needed me to be one. They needed a scapegoat to make themselves feel better about their own mediocrity. And I played along for 37 years because I thought that's what family did. You take the hit, you keep the peace. You show up with potato salad and a smile while they carve you up at the dinner table. But Richard saw through it. Richard, who married my mother and inherited 2 daughters who weren't his, saw that one of them was drowning and the other was the only one who knew how to swim. He didn't give me the trust because he loved me more. He gave it to me because he trusted me more. And that, in the end, is worth more than love. Trust is love that's been tested. Love is just a word until someone proves they mean it. My sister is having a baby, a niece or nephew I've never met, who doesn't know they exist yet. And one day, if Emma gets her act together, if she learns to manage money and build a life that doesn't depend on my approval, I'll release those funds. I'll hand over $18 million and I'll watch her turn it into something beautiful or watch her burn it to the ground. Either way, it won't be my fault. Either way, I'll know that I did exactly what Richard asked me to do. But until then, the money sits. And so do I. And my family sits in their beautiful Lake Oswego house, eating ham off fine china, wondering how the screw-up became the one holding all the cards. The answer is simple. I didn't become anything. I was always this person. They just never bothered to look.